Good evening. We have the great pleasure of a discussion with Minister Khalid Al Falih. Minister, you are in charge, I think your official title is Minister of Energy, Industry and Natural Resources, or Mineral Resources. But of course, you are well known not only as the leading energy minister in the world, but also as the chairman of what is now the largest company in the world, at least the companies with the highest profitability, as we have seen last week. So, and you yourself, when you built the company as the CEO to a large extent, and I think you were always considered and in the list of the most admired business leaders, and that's how I got to know you quite a number of years ago. So I also want to express my appreciation for the strong Saudi delegation which you brought with you here to this MENA summit. So a cordial welcome also to all members of your delegation. Let me ask you with the first question, and I come back to your title, Energy, Industry, and Mineral Resources. Do you actually believe that Saudi Arabia can develop a significant industry? Is that you are in charge? Do you have the potential to develop a significant industry?
Well, let me, Professor Schwab, start by expressing my appreciation and admiration of you and the World Economic Forum and your leadership, and for what has been consistent inclusiveness in your approach to looking at problems of the world and how to address them. And from the beginning, from the early days of the forum and the Davos meeting and all of the initiatives you have led, you've always looked at the Middle East with a very keen and special eye. Nobody would have blamed you if you focused on Europe, US, China, and high growth areas of the world, but you've always looked at this region with a very special eye, and I know you've always been persistent in including us from the region and not only addressing our own problems, but being part of the solution for global issues. And I think the fact that you're holding this summit here in Jordan for the 10th time is a testament to that approach, which we highly appreciate. And before I get into my portfolio and industry within the kingdom, and I know it's easy to ask the kind of question that you asked, and you ask it in a very positive way, but some people ask it with skepticism, can the Middle East, with all of the challenges that we are facing, and we're seeing it in North Africa, we're seeing it in Syria, we're seeing it in Yemen. Iraq is still yet to emerge from the after-war reconstruction. It's easy to be skeptical and negative about the Middle East and only look for pockets of opportunity and value in those areas that have strong economic potential, or those sectors like oil and gas and other such opportunities. But I want to, if I may, be optimistic and put where the Middle East is in a historic perspective, and recall a statement made by His Royal Highness Prince Mohammed bin Salman, our Crown Prince, last year when he was talking about the kingdom in the context of an awakening of the Middle East. Saudi Arabia is in a journey of transformation and reform and growth and opportunity and inclusiveness. But we also see this and hope to do this while while the rest of the Middle East will rise with us. And as they say, rising tide will lift all boats. And of course, you're a student of history. You know that Europe came out of the ashes of World War II with collaboration and partnership of the rest of the world with it, and created an economic, political, and social miracle that we're still witnessing it with high standards of living and prosperity despite many challenges that Europe continues to face. And of course, Asia had the same challenge and doom and gloom after World War II, and we saw Japan, Korea, and more recently China also create economic miracles. And His Royal Highness did say that the Middle East will be the next Europe. And it's not going to be underpinned by simply hope and positive attitude, but by a lot of transformative initiatives that many of the leaders are undertaking. And I think more importantly, by a belief in the young people. And you are also, Klaus, have been inclusive of the young and women in the forum's initiatives. And of course, I have met many young Saudis who are part of the Shapers community that you support, and young global leaders as well. But young people in Saudi Arabia and young people in the region are highly educated. They do believe in their capabilities. And we're seeing entrepreneurial enterprises across the kingdom that are supporting the major government-led reforms and a strong private sector. Going back to industry, the kingdom has had two major revolutions, so to speak, in our industrial history. One was in the 40s and 50s, when out of nothing, the largest, most advanced oil and gas industry today has prospered. And it's led by Saudis, operated by Saudis, innovated by Saudis. Today, Saudi Aramco leads an industry, but it's an industry, it's an ecosystem that is extremely competitive, successful, sustainable, and as you mentioned in your opening remarks, the most profitable on the planet. So it can happen in Saudi Arabia, and it can happen in partnership with the rest of the world, but primarily led by Saudis. In the 70s, 80s, and 90s, we created arguably the most profitable also, but the most advanced petrochemical industry. And it's led by SABIC, but there are many other companies, including Saudi Aramco, who are major producers of advanced chemicals and materials and elastomers and rubbers in industrial estates in Saudi Arabia. The next wave, which was launched a couple of months ago when I had to skip Davos for that launch event in January, is the National Industrial Development and Logistics Program within the kingdom. And it's going to combine a very strong natural resource advantage in minerals, in energies, and I'm not only talking about conventional energy in oil and gas, but also renewables, as we will have one of the largest renewable programs. Industry that is underpinned by technology and innovation, and a strong research ecosystem that have been started and will continue to grow in the kingdom, and powered by SMEs and entrepreneurial enterprises led by the youth that I talked about earlier, but also is inclusive of our foreign partners. Each wave of growth and opportunity in Saudi Arabia has been underpinned by that global cooperation. So the kingdom has been always open for business from the early days of the oil concession in the 1930s, but it's more so today under Vision 2030 and the reforms that have been unleashed. And for foreign enterprises doing business in Saudi Arabia, they're going to be treated exactly the same, if not more favorably, than wholly owned Saudi companies. And of course, joint ventures. And the intent is not only to bring capital. In fact, capital is not the objective at all. We will finance most of these ventures. The objective is to bring know-how, to bring technology, to bring brands, to bring markets, and to bring global connectivity.
Khalid, when you look at industrial development, you could distinguish roughly between consumption-oriented industry, high-tech industry, and let's say industrial development very closely related to your energy base and your competitive advantage, particularly also in energy costs. What is actually the target? Which of those industries are you aiming at?
Well, Klaus, it's actually all of the above. The kingdom will not abandon oil and gas. It will continue for many decades to be a main driver of our economic base and also be a platform on which to grow our industry. The difference this time is that we're going to use it and continue to build the pyramids of value add. So I mentioned oil and gas, I mentioned primary chemical industries, and these are olefins and polymers and elastomers and aromatics. Where we need to go next while continuing to grow the base of that pyramid is go vertical into higher value add. So more conversion industries to convert those materials into final products. You call it consumption industry, more advanced manufacturing into IT equipment, into appliances, into the new automobile industries, and these will likely be a combination of conventional automobiles, but also electric vehicles, hydrogen-powered vehicles with photocells that we are researching and developing with auto manufacturers. We're also closely working with aerospace companies and looking to do airplane manufacturing in Kingdom. That will be supported by the industry that we've already created. Advanced materials, aluminum is big in Saudi Arabia and in the rest of the region. So taking it from commodity aluminum to advanced aerospace grade and being able to assemble aircraft in the Kingdom is only one of the many clusters that we have developed execution plans for. One element I didn't mention, but you alluded to it with the word consumption, is demand. The Kingdom is one of the largest markets, certainly the largest market in the Middle East region. But if you look at the whole region, and if you look at Africa as part of a larger marketplace, then you've got a huge demand around us that we could customize product and we could reach them logistically much better than faraway manufacturing center. In the Kingdom, we're establishing a local content procurement policy that will favor manufacturers within the Kingdom and within the region. We're also looking at supply chain, not in a narrow way, but in an integrated way. So as we bring OEMs in Saudi Arabia, we're providing them with databases about where the part suppliers and the material suppliers are within our immediate region. And we hope Jordan, for example, will be benefiting from the industries and the major assemblies that take place in the Kingdom.
At the heart of your Vision 2030 is a stronger engagement of the private sector in the economic development of Saudi Arabia. Can you elaborate on it? What role do you foresee? Because particularly when the industry remains somewhere connected to, let's say, to your energy strengths, what freedom will you allow to the private investor and private industry?
Well, you will be surprised how much freedom we're already allowing, but I think it takes time for the private sector to believe that all of the ingredients are in place. And we're putting all of the enablers to make sure that the private sector does see in black and white through term sheets for each type of investment in each of the clusters that we're going for in mining, industry, and logistics, so that they do the entire investment for us. Of course, there will always be things that the government has to do. So, for example, in logistics, as I mentioned, the government will probably end up financing laying down of major railways because they are infrastructure that is typically financed by the government. But we do allow and we encourage the private sector to own the actual trains and whether it's for material or people movement across the kingdom. We're allowing the private sector to own and operate ports and airports in the kingdom today. Certainly any manufacturing facility is available for the private sector. Even state-owned assets are being privatized at an accelerating pace. That includes water desalination, and we've already achieved quite a bit of success over the last 12 months in privatizing water desalination. Soon, I hope, we'll be offering our existing generation assets within the Saudi Electric Company for private sector investment. But individual plants, IPPs, have already been tendered for many, many years, and operators of those are operating very successfully. So for the audience here, I just want to be unequivocal in stating that Saudi Arabia government would rather not invest in productive capacity. We believe the private sector can do it more efficiently, can bring better technology, and will be more profitable. And we want them to enjoy those profits. There is no, there is no desire to limit profitability or to cap profitability through a progressive profit tax regime in the kingdom. As most of you know, the kingdom has one of the lowest taxes on profits and on investment.
My next question is addressed to you also in your capacity, not only as Minister of Energy, but also as Chairman of Saudi Aramco. There's a lot of discussion now in the world about, and also in Davos has happened, about the energy transition. And we see now all the efforts of the car industry. I just was in Japan, talked to Prime Minister Abe, and he bets the future very much on hydrogen. And then we have the whole, let's say, movement against plastics. Let me ask the question in a very provocative way. Do we need fossil energy still in the future? And how much is Saudi Arabia's position threatened by a slow erosion of demand for fossil energy?
Well, Klaus, I mean, if you think of human kind, we have to think in terms of, the evolution of history. The long-term answer is we must get off fossil fuels ultimately. But that transition that you refer to will require many, many decades to take place. We also have a demographic issue to deal with, which is that billions of people, and we heard today from the president of Nigeria talking about in the next 2 or 3 decades, another 150 million people in Nigeria alone joining us on this planet. So 2 billion more people that will join us. In addition, there are 1 billion to 2 billion people with various degrees of limited access to energy. Add to this increased level of prosperity, and you end up with billions of people who will be joining the middle class, who need modern standards of living, who needs mobility, who needs warmth and cooling and clean energy. And we're going to require all the forms of energy that we can get our hands on. Certainly renewables, we're going to maximize the use of renewables. In mobility, electric vehicles will contribute, but they're going to be limited by real technical and economic factors. Hydrogen has some merits, and we're investing in it, as I mentioned, but also will not provide the solution alone. We're investing heavily in cleaning and improving the performance of oil and gas through not only the production cycle, but in the consumption as well for our customers, including radical redesigns of the internal combustion engines that will make it more environmentally sustainable than current technologies for electric vehicles. So we have to look at energy holistically across the value chain, from the production all the way to consumption, to recycling of the materials, whether they're batteries or conventional engines and cars. The analysis we have seen and looked at tells us that we need all of the forms of energy for many decades. And therefore, in my capacity as energy minister, I advise my government, I advise our customers that they need to plan on using oil and gas judiciously, with efficiency, with applying technology for maximum sustainability, and investing in this entire chain for a few more decades to come. I think oil and gas will ultimately peak. Is it the middle of the century or a little beyond? I don't know, but it's not anytime soon, and therefore it's imperative on us and in me, on my capacity as the energy minister of the kingdom, to continue to invest in oil and gas to make sure that it's available in the next decade and beyond for this growing population and the growing global economy. While at the same time, doubling up our investments on renewables, which we have done on solar in particular. The kingdom will be one of the largest producers of solar technology, while looking for ways to mitigate the impact of carbon. So carbon not only capture, but conversion to useful products, which we have done at scale in the kingdom, and we will yet scale it up even more. So I think the short answer is we need all of the above in terms of the solutions that are available to us.
So it's not just to move into, let's say, new types of energies, it's also to make the old types of energy, fossil fuels, more environmentally acceptable. That's part of the solution.
And this is one of the issues that the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, we're of course a big signatory of, an important signatory of the Paris Agreement, and we have been active in creating the rule book, which was just adopted in Poland a couple of months ago. But what we advocate in the Kingdom is that green finance, for example, need to address the holistic menu of energies that are being utilized and will continue to be utilized for a long time to come, rather than only focusing on renewables. Renewables still is less than 10%, and no matter how fast they grow, we will continue to burn a lot of fossil fuels and emit their emissions in the air, and therefore it's incumbent on us as a global community to mitigate that and invest in it.
Yeah. When you look at the challenges of your country, the kingdom, but also, of course, the whole Arab region, two challenges stand out. It's youth unemployment and it's empowerment of women. How do you address those challenges, particularly also in your plan of 2030?
Well, I think there are a number of tracks that one has to pursue. One of them, of course, is much talked about, but somewhat superficially, is education and skill development, and how to get the right outcome from this, in my opinion, and in my experience. You mentioned my experience in Aramco, is getting the private sector to be involved in preparing the youth and the employees of both genders that they will end up hiring. We've had sort of a standoffish attitude between the private sector and governments, and complaining that there is a mismatch between the quality of education that is being given to young people and what they need. And the solution is for the private sector to be part of that creation. So what we've done at Saudi Aramco and in the kingdom at large is do public-private partnership where the curricula is actually designed by the owners of the companies and the facilities that will hire those young people. And they're also sitting on the board, and they get involved in selecting the high school graduates and bringing them in the intake and mentoring them as they go through their skill development period, their academic part, so to speak, and then they take them and give them on-the-job training on the job. And we've found this a very successful model. I think also letting universities go free. Many universities in the Arab world have been part and parcels of bureaucratic ministries of education. In the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, our current minister, Dr. Hamad Al-Sheikh, is about to launch a new university regulatory regime where each university will have its own board of trustees and will be free to design its curricula for the workforce of the future that it graduates, and they will be measured. The KPIs will be, are the graduates getting the jobs, the right jobs, the high-paying jobs in the private sector? So you create competition, and it doesn't become a cost center, but a profit center based on creating employment. The other pillar, Klaus, of course, is entrepreneurship, SMEs, creating an organic system where young people experiment, creating a failure environment where failure is not encouraged, but certainly dealt with in a positive way, and that young people are given the opportunity to fail, and succeed ultimately, and not only create opportunities for themselves through wealth creation, which is obviously what every young person wants, but also employment and opportunities for hundreds and thousands of people. And the governments need to have a role. We have the SME Commission in Saudi Arabia, Munshaat. We have funding for venture capital. We have incubators in the kingdom. There are many of them. And some of them are being linked to universities. So Tony Chan from KAUST is here with us. He has done some of this. He's only starting. But we hope to see hundreds of these startups coming up with innovations that are not only going to change our countries and the region, but indeed, in due course, will be part of the global movement where young, innovative enterprises are creating the economies and the solutions of the future.
And empowerment of women?
Empowerment of women, of course, is a key area for the region and for us in the kingdom. It is going to take time. I have to admit there are many enterprises in the kingdom, both public and private, where women have never worked. And these enterprises have cultures that have existed for decades and decades. Today, you see each one of them with plans of their own to attract and create opportunities. Society itself has to adjust to two parents working and the children being attended to by a different member of the family or taken to a nursery, and things of that sort. So you have both society has to adjust, the workplace has to adjust, educational institution where women have been studying have also to do what I talked about earlier in terms of education and skill development and prepare. And we have to find solutions ultimately that are suited for our society. What may have worked in Europe, in the West, in Asia will almost certainly not work as is in the Middle East. We will have our own formula for women empowerment and women inclusiveness in our economy and in our workplace. And even within the Middle East, what works in Egypt will be slightly different than what will work in Saudi Arabia. But what I am certain of is that there is a determination. Our women are determined to do their share, and they're already doing it. I can tell you that in Aramco, where we have employed women, relatively in large number, they have outperformed their counterpart, the men, in Saudi Arabia. So they are more capable intellectually, but they also have the patience and the resilience to take the pressures of the workplace. But they have different responsibilities at home. When they get married, they have to raise children, and society slows them down. So I think this experiment will take place, and I'm sure women will thrive in Saudi Arabia and in the region in the future, as they have done historically. Women have played a very important part of our history.
We are running out of time, but I have to say, when I visited your headquarters in Jeddah, I had the feeling you were working already 2 years ago as a kind of sandbox, and I was so impressed by how you took care of the young generation and also how you integrated women into your management. So if you can roll this model out to the larger scale, in a larger scale, I'm very optimistic. But being at the end of our session, I have one question. When you look at 2030, your vision 2030, and if you had to summarize what, in one sentence or 2 sentences, what will be the major change which will have happened in Saudi Arabia compared to today?
Well, on the economic side, we will definitely be driven by multiple sectors. Nobody can deny that the kingdom is largely oil dependent. We have been for many decades. So what we are building, I used the metaphor of an airplane before. Our airplane is getting bigger, and it's going to have many more engines. And mining, ICT, advanced manufacturing, logistics, services, tourism, all of these engines will grow over time, and ultimately they will eclipse oil and their contributions to the Saudi economy. I think our enterprises will multiply in size. We talked about entrepreneurship and SMEs, and I predict that by 2030, companies that we don't know today will be amongst the top 20, 30 companies in Saudi Arabia. They will be driven by innovation, they will be driven by young people, they will be driven by women, and they will be taking leading roles within those engines that the economy is growing. So it's about diversity, and it's about inclusiveness, but it's also about connectivity to the rest of the world. And the audience here, and certainly the World Economic Forum, I hope will be part of this exciting journey that we will undertake in the next 10 years.
And we wish you all the best for this journey. Thank you very much, Minister Khalid Al Falih. Thank you.